What's up, guys? This is Jay Griff. Welcome back to the Dark Souls 2 Blog of Pain. It's been a long time since I've done a blog entry because, for very expensive and unfortunate reasons, the last computer I had went up in flames. So we lost the last episode that I recorded, and as a result, I'm going to compress uh, the episode I was going to do after that and the episode that I already did into one episode. So this is going to be the quickest and dirtiest of the quick and dirty. This is the Dark Souls Blog of Pain, and I'm going to be talking about the last two DLC packs that I had left in this game to talk about, and that's the Crown of the Old Iron King and the Crown of the Ivory King. So, leaping right into it. Crown of the Old Iron King. I'm going to classify this one as being a bad area with amazing bosses. Okay, this area was crap, but the long and short of it is that the Old Iron King, so he had amassed a lot of power, and his faithful knight, Alon, who we heard about in the base game. We had the Old Iron Keep, we learned about the Old Iron King, we fought what was left of the Old Iron King. He was Icarus Earth, and he was possessed by the soul of Gwyn. And the Alon Knights were still hanging out in his kingdom. So they were still there, and they were still kind of doing a job. What exactly that job was a little hard to determine, but this DLC shed a little bit of light on what they might have been doing. But we know that the Old Iron King was very obsessed with projecting of power. He was extremely powerful. He respected strength, he amassed strength, and as a result, in the end, he became so arrogant in his power that he created the Smelter Demon, that particular boss that really gave me hell in my first playthrough of the game. Well, he made that thing, and it turns out the very first thing that the Smelter Demon did when it was birthed was killed the Old Iron King. Just popped out, thanks, Dad, and you're dead. So that's how the Old Iron King originally died. And as usually happens in the Dark Souls series, when the king dies, the kingdom falls to shit. Everything falls apart. A bunch of people end up leaving. In this case, the Alon Knights took the hell off pretty quickly after the death of the Old Iron King. But he died. Kingdom fell into ruin, and that's when Nadalia entered the scene. Nadalia is the Queen of the Dark for this particular part of the story, and like Ilana, like Nishandra, she's a bit of a bitch. So she shows up in the Old Iron Kingdom, and she discovers that the Old Iron King is already dead. So the king whose power had originally attracted her to the place is gone, and she can't use him for whatever it is she wanted to use him for. So out of whether it was sorrow or rage or spite, she forsook her flesh when she found out about that. And what that basically means is that she split her body and her soul to cover the kingdom in a thick blanket of ash. And this ash was very much hers, and it's an extension of her. And along with that, there are these effigies of her that are now all fucking over the zone. I think there's either 11 or 12 of them. And every single one of them, with the exception of the first one because you can easily bypass it, is a major goddamn problem the whole time you're going through this zone, because what these fucking things do is a weird combination of either buffing the enemies in the area to a ridiculous amount, to where they already have really high health and really high damage, and she just basically doubles all of that for anything that's near her. She might heal the enemies that are in the area. That's a huge fucking pain, especially if you get down to the boss arena and you don't deal with the ones that are down there before you take on the boss. They'll heal the boss. That makes that fight completely impossible. And there are some that spit pyromancies that are corrupted with dark all over the goddamn place in a random pattern, kind of like the firestorm. It sucks. But the worst one is the one that can do two of those. It buffs the enemies, and if you get too close to it, it also spews the pyromancies. That's God, I hate it. I hate it. And I hate this area. I fucking hate this zone. This zone fucking sucked. It tried so hard to look like the one that came before it, to look like the Crown of the Sunken King. Like, no, we have all these layers, and there's all these alternate paths, and there's not. There is one critical path through the area, and if you don't do it in the correct order, you can't open any of the other goddamn doors. So it's a huge lie. And the enemies in the zone are just designed to get you. They're not fun to fight. They're extremely strong, especially if one of the effigies is around. And they're set up in such a way where they can just fucking destroy you. They have such a huge advantage. There's one particular room where the only reason I even made it through was I figured out a way to basically cheat the collision detection of the very of the game itself and kind of bullshit some arrows into the room that I shouldn't have been able to shoot in there because it was like 7 dudes, a guy up top who you can't even get to throwing fire bombs, a giant guy who's leaking lava out of his side the entire time, and an effigy that is buffing those guys, and that's the one effigy in the game that fucking spews the fire and does the buff. Oh, I hated it. I hated it so bad. And the only way you can get rid of these effigies is by using a specific item called the Smelter Wedge. And you get 6 of them when you enter the area. They're just sitting there. You grab them. And then there's 6 more that are hidden throughout the zones. And the last one is actually, you have to beat an optional boss to get it. And the only real reason you would need the last one is if you want the last piece of her soul to make any of her items or just see the description. It's not actually necessary. But the problem is that because they hide 5 of the wedges from you, or 6 of the wedges from you, you have to be careful about how you're using them. If you just go through the zones and you hit every effigy that you encounter, which you really shouldn't, you will find yourself screwed over if you don't find those other 5. Because there's some that you just want to bypass and you want to leave them there, because once you get to a bonfire past them, they're not going to be a problem. But there's 4 of them at the bottom of the area in the boss arena, around the boss arena at least, and if you don't have the 4 smelter wedges to deal with them, you're not beating that boss. I don't care who you are. You're just not going to pull it off. So that's a bit of a trick that I think is a little dirty of FromSoft to pull. It's very like them, but I think it's a little dirty. But so that's what's going on with Nadalia. I didn't like the area, like I said. It wasn't actually as interesting as it tries to look. It's mostly just fight a ton of really tough enemies in a gauntlet. That's most of what it is. But you get to the bottom of this area. You get to the final bonfire. You see this big-ass room with a boss fog and 4 of those goddamn effigies that are just spamming healing magics, healing pyromancies. Deal with them. You go in there, and you get to fight the Fume Knight. Now, the Fume Knight is Rain, who is a guy that was mentioned a couple times, I think, in the base game. He was kind of a counterpoint to Velstadt, who was King Vendrick's final defender. He was one of the bosses. He was all about the king and the light and preserving the purity. Rain, his whole deal seemed to be mostly about power, and there was some sort of disagreement between either him and Vendrick or him and Velstadt. I'm not 100% on what happened there, but it doesn't really matter. The point is, Rain left Drangleic, and he came to the Old Iron Kingdom, and he found Nadalia. And it's said that he became infatuated with Nadalia, so whether or not he met her when she was old, decrepit, broken into 12 pieces, or when she was, like, sexy, come to tempt you, Nadalia, that's not known. But what is known is that he devoted himself completely to her and her power, and as a result, went from Rain to the Fume Knight. And the Fume Knight is a bad-ass motherfucker. This guy, up to this point, is the best goddamn boss in the game. He is fucking awesome, and he will wreck your shit. He has an amazing moveset, and he's got this really awesome sword, and he varies it. He varies his pattern. He's really hard to read. You can read him, but it's really hard. You gotta really know. He's gonna wreck your shit for a while, and it's one of those few areas in the game where there's still a lot of players helping each other, because this is some bad shit. He's just so cool, and he's so fun to fight. You don't feel cheated when the Fume Knight beats you. You feel like, yeah, he beat me. He fair and fucking square. He is he's pretty much overpowered. But it's a good kind of overpowered. It's the kind of overpowered that makes you want to fight him again, not the kind of overpowered that makes you want to chuck your controller across the room and never pick the game up again. So cool. So cool. And when you finally take him down, it's so good. And then I was using his sword the whole rest of the game. I was using his armor the whole rest of the game. He's just so fucking cool. And then you get the crown of the Old Iron King, and you're pretty much good there. That's it. That's all you have to do. But if you want to do the real Old Iron King experience, it's time for you to go up against Alon. So you gotta find a hidden area with a special invader that comes after you and all that, and you find a set of armor that allows you to go into a memory. And in this memory, you will find Alon, because, like I said, the Alon Knights who are in the Old Iron Keep, they're not in this DLC. There's no Alon presence except for this piece of armor. So all of these Alon Knights are there in the past. They're there in memory. Alon, what I think happened is that Alon was the Old Iron King's most resolute, vassal. He was his number one. And after he died, and Nadalia showed up, he said, "No, fuck you, fuck that. We're not about this darkness. We're not about your ash. We're getting out of here." And the Alon Knights that are still around when you're playing the game in the base game I think what they're doing is they're trying to keep the Smelter Demon where he is, because the Smelter Demon killed their king. And I think they don't want it getting out. I think that's why there's Alon Knights all over the place, and why when you come gallivanting along, they try to kill you, because they don't want you getting in and pissing off the Smelter Demon, and then it fucking runs off. It's also possible that they are defending what's left of their king, because the Old Iron King, his soul has reemerged from the earth, and it is there. So it's possible that that's also what they're doing. That's the only real reason I can see for them to be in the base game and not be in the DLC. Like from their heyday or something. But so you can go into these memories. You go through essentially a challenge area similar to the one in the first DLC, and you reach Alon. And Alon, holy fucking shit! Like, the Fume Knight kicked your teeth in. Alon is gonna rip your head off. He is the fucking boss. He is a goddamn samurai, essentially. He's got one of those, I don't know what you call it, but he's got one of those kind of katanas with the really long handle. I think it's used for against cavalry, but he's using one of those against you, and he's the only one with that type of weapon in the game, and he's extremely fast. He's extremely acrobatic, and he has an attack where if he could stab you with it, he kind of absorbs power out of you and gets twice as angry and twice as fast. And I never survived a fight once he did that. Once he did that, it was over. Whether it was because he actually got that much harder or because I was just intimidated at that point, I don't know. Because you've never felt pressure like you felt when you fight Alon. You come off fighting the Fume Knight and you're like, yeah, fucking Fume Knight, I got this. And then you run into Alon and it's like, you ain't got shit, boy. You have not learned anything. I'm going to teach you how to fucking fight. And while I took down the Fume Knight with some assistance, I made the point that I was going to fight Alon alone. I was going to handle him myself. And then I helped a couple people out. I put down my summon sign, which summon signs actually in there are very rare. There's 2 NPCs you can summon. They're not great, but you can summon them. But I didn't actually get to take on Alon with other people. I summoned one of the NPCs, I think, to just try to distract him because he was so strong. I couldn't handle him alone. But he died fairly quickly anyway, so it was kind of a one-on-one fight. But Alon was just amazing. It's just amazing that you get to the end of this game where so many of the bosses have been lame and stupid or weak and easy, and like you get these masterpiece boss fights that are essentially just big dudes. The hell happened, FromSoft? Why isn't every boss like that? Every boss should be like that. And there should be like maybe 1/3 of the bosses that are actually in the game. And if they were all like that, amazing. Amazing this game would be. Holy shit, if that was everybody. But it's not. But point is, Alon, the Fume Knight, fucking amazing. Fucking amazing. I loved them. It almost makes up for how shitty the zone was. Almost. Not quite. Okay, moving on. Moving on. All right, so the Crown of the Ivory King. So here, instead of a bad area with great bosses, we have a great area with amazing bosses as well. Not as difficult, but I still think that they're great. I love the bosses in this area. So this is Aleum Lois, right? Aleum Lois is a frozen kingdom. It seems to be high up in the mountains, but it's frozen for a different reason. But it's amazing. This area is so beautiful, and it's obscured by this terrible blizzard when you show up. And when you first show up, there's these icy tendrils that come bursting out of a door, and a voice that's telling you, hey, turn back, get out of here. The old chaos is here. You don't want none. And I'm like, old chaos, huh? Tendrils, huh? That's a flame of chaos in there, isn't it? And it was. And that's bad news bears, because not only is the flame of chaos bad for business in general, it's also the worst boss from Dark Souls 1, so I ain't about to let that shit get back out. So, we go into Aleum Lois, and it's mostly a straight shot, but I'll forgive it this time because it's not terrible or trying to pretend it's something that it's not. And there were a couple of alternate paths for secrets and stuff. But the enemies here, I liked them. I think they went maybe a little bit too far with the amount of poise and health that they have, because I'm doing this with the Fume Knight Ultra Greatsword, which is basically overpowered. And I was struggling really well with some of these enemies, and I'm just sitting here fighting them. I'm like, there's how would a Dex character make it through this area? I have no idea how a Dex build would legitimately do this. And I had a Dex build up until I beat the Fume Knight and got his sword, and then I switched over to a Strength build so I could use it. But the poise thresholds, the HP levels, it's fucking nuts. But so you find out as you're going through the area that Aleum was frozen over by its queen in order to protect the rest of the world from the return of the old chaos. And that's very interesting to me, because this is the first instance we have of a large manifestation of the Dark Soul coming up. It's the fourth queen in the game, and it's the fifth iteration if you count Manus, and it's the first one that's not either just running rampant or completely evil. This one was benevolent, and that's very different. What we find out with this one is that she was fearful, she was timid, she was weak, and she was drawn to the king, who embraced her and protected her. And because of this, she's gentle. So the old Ivory King, he was a great warrior who commanded incredible loyalty from his people, and particularly his knights, the Knights of Aleum Lois. And he and his brave knights went down into the old chaos to challenge it when it showed up. And they didn't return. A few knights, Aleum knights, did make it out, but the king didn't come back, and the large brunt of the Aleum Lois knights did not return. So things went very badly for them, and the queen froze the kingdom to try to keep it contained. And that's just what she's been doing. She's been sitting here trying to keep the ice thick enough so that the flame of chaos can't get back out. You have to get in there to do something about this. And it's a strange area in that you can actually skip it, in a way. Because the first thing that you can do when you walk through the first gate is you can take a right and you can do the area, or you can take a left and you can go straight into the boss room. And it's the first of the two bosses that are in this particular DLC, and it's the king's pet, Ava, who is a fucking awesome boss because he's a giant white tiger that uses sorcery. That's fucking cool. You're in there, you're duking it out with this fucking giant cat, and then it'll jump away and just fucking crystal soul mass, and he's gonna fucking destroy you with that. That's fucking cool. I loved fighting Ava. But the thing is, the first time you go in there and you're like, where's the boss? What is this? Where's the boss? Because he's got a health bar, you know he is. He's invisible. He's fucking invisible. So it's like, yeah, go in there. Yeah, go on. You got this. You got this. You'll be fine. And he kicks your fucking ass. You can beat him. I mean, people beat him if they know his pattern. But if you don't know his pattern, which you don't know the first time walking in, he's gonna kill you. And it's a trap. It's a trap for new players to be like, okay, there's something else going on here. And there's something else going on is that there are invisible things in Aleum Lois, and you have to find a special item so that you can see the unseen. And that's cool. So you go through the area and you get the item and you see the unseen, and you defeat Ava. Unfortunately, you do have to kill the poor beast. And then you go and talk to the queen, and she's like, "Okay, I'm gonna lift the blizzard so that you can go in there, but the king didn't come back alive, so whatever." And so she gets rid of the blizzard. You can see the area clearly now, and it's just huge and it's beautiful. It's kind of like it's probably what New Londo would have looked like if we got to see it before it was a ruin. And it's basically Disney. It's like a Disney fucking castle is going on here. And you get to go in and you get to fight the old chaos. And the one thing you'll notice as you're walking up there is that there's chairs around a pit, and then there's the boss door. And as you approach, there's someone sitting in one of the chairs, and he stands up and he just looks at you. And when you go through the boss door, he hops down the pit with you, and you descend into the old chaos. What a shot descending into the old chaos is! This is some cool shit. It's like, hey, you have just jumped directly into hell. Please have fun, and don't let the door hit you on the way out. So you get down there, and you've got this one guy, and he's got his white armor, and it's you and him against the army of the burnt Aleum Knights who went down there and have been corrupted by the Flame of Chaos, and they're spawning in through these gates. And they are spawning continuously, and they are a big fucking problem. They are really tough, and they're using obviously pyromancy because they're been corrupted by the Flame of Chaos. And then at some point, your buddy absorbs enough souls, and he goes and he seals one of the doors that they're coming through, but he sacrifices himself to do it. So, and there's 3 doors. So there's 2 of them that are still open, and if you live long enough, the burnt Ivory King will arrive. And he arrives like goddamn Sauron coming out of Barad-dûr. It's fucking cool, and it gets you really, really excited to fight this guy. And if his dudes are still spawning in, you're fucked. He's gonna kill you. But that's, again, part of the design of the area, is to let you go in there, get your shit wrecked, and then be like, okay, so I've got one guy who can seal 1 gate, there's 3 gates, and there's 4 chairs at the top here. So where are those guys? So what you get to do is you get to go back into the zone, which is now a little different because when the blizzard went away, a lot of the huge ice flows that are in the area melt, and they open up a whole bunch of new areas that you can go through, and you can find these Lois Knights one by one. And basically, when you show up and they see you, they kind of understand that what's going on. They're like, oh, so we got you now, and the blizzard's gone. I know what I got to do. And he goes and takes his position around the pit, and eventually you can find the other 3, so you can have all 4 of the Lois Knights. And then, if you really want to, you can summon in players. And I think there might be 1 NPC. No, I don't think there's an NPC. But you can summon in players. And you could go in there fucking 7 on 7 versus all of them. And you handle the burnt Lois Knights a lot more easily with these 4 Lois Knights, even if you don't bring in other players. And then they've sealed up all the gates, so when the burnt Ivory King comes out, it's actually still you and a Lois Knight if you've kept them alive against the Ivory King. Now, he will kill the Lois Knight very quickly because of his damage output, but then it's a great fight. The burnt Ivory King is a great fight. He is extremely well designed, and he's tough, but he's not impossible. He's not nearly as difficult as I would say the Fume Knight or Elan. So he's not a raw progression blocker, but he's still a really good fight, and he's fun. He is fun to fight, and then you can make his sword and stuff with it later, and it's awesome because it's a giant energy blade. That's cool. I love that. And then you beat him, and you get to go back up, and the queen thanks you for what you've done, and then she's like, but so many Lois Knights were lost in the process, and then becomes something I didn't finish because it went too far with this. But you can go back in there, and you can keep fighting the burnt Lois Knights to get the Lois souls, and you can take those back to her, and she'll give you pieces of the Lois set as you go along. But you need 50 of those things, and the drop rate is really, really low, and eventually they stop spawning in, so that was kind of a bad idea on their part. But it was a cool concept. I liked it. And so that's the end of that DLC. I didn't touch the challenge area for that zone. I know about it. It doesn't sound like something I want to spend the time to conquer because it's a lot of invisible enemies again, but that's okay. I'm satisfied with my experience with the game because I've now reached the end of the game. I have the Ivory Crown, and then you can go back to see Vendrick, you say, "Hey, I got all these crowns. How about that one, dude?" And he's basically like, the power to resist the curse is the power of the crowns, is the power to govern men, and he gives you the crowns back, but they're a little different. Because now if you wear any of the crowns, if you wear his crown, which I had already, I don't know if you need it for this, but if you wear his crown, the sunken crown, the old iron crown, or the ivory crown, it acts kind of like a life ring because it removes the curse from you. When you die, you will still drop your souls, but you will not lose your humanity. You will stay human. You will not hollow. You will not be cursed. And so you have conquered the curse in a way. You still have it, but as long as you wear a crown, you are not plagued by it. And I think that's a really nice touch for the end of the game. For you basically done everything. So here, if you don't want to go hollow anymore, you don't have to. Go crazy. I think that's great. I think it's a great way to cap off the game. So it's a very appropriate way to usher in the end of the series. Now, the Scholar of the First Sin is out now as a patch. I don't want to play it because it looks terrible. It looks like they have shoved just as many enemies as they possibly could into every zone with no consideration as to whether or not they should actually be there, and no real balancing because I've heard it plays like shit. So I'm not going to touch that, and there won't be any reviews of the Scholar of the First Sin from me on this blog. So that's Dark Souls 2. You know, I really loved it. I really loved it. As much as I mourn it and as much crap as I give it, I love it. It's an amazing game. It is a must play, I feel like, for anybody. Everyone should play these games because there's just such good design that went in to the Souls series. And even though Dark Souls 2 isn't as good as Dark Souls 1, it's still way more solid than a lot of the stuff that's out there on the market. If I was to give it a score, I would, as a standalone title, I would give Dark Souls 2 4 Lord Souls out of 5. It is a great fucking solid title that will probably drive you crazy from time to time because of what it is and some design decisions that I disagreed with. But it's a great game, and you should definitely play it. If I was to rate it as a Souls game, as the successor to Dark Souls 1, I would give it 2 Lord Souls out of 5. Because it is clumsy and does not stack up to the standard that was actually set by the first Dark Souls. The story is clumsy. It reads like fan fiction. There's certain problems with the gameplay and collision detection that they didn't sort out properly in a game with very deliberate combat. It needs to be solid. I've talked about all of this. But we have a new arrival in the world of Souls. We have been delivered from the hell of Dark Souls 2 with the arrival of Bloodborne. This game. Whoa. So stay tuned for the blog of pain on Bloodborne. Praise the sun and prepare to die. It has begun again. I'll see you next time.